It was the epitome of I support women's rights, but more importantly, I support women's wrongs. You know those videos of like those husbands that make their pregnant wife sleep on the sofa and they sleep on the hospital bed? Bo would never. He would have a heart attack before he did that to win. But it was like 12 in the morning and I was sobbing in my bed. So maybe it was a good thing I didn't get that on camera because I don't think anyone wants to see that. This like changed my brain chemistry. I'm not kidding. Like I think about this book probably every day. I go on TikTok and I look at fan art. Like it just did something to me. Okay, I just loved it. Welcome back to my channel. So today's video is super fun, which is my February reading wrap up. So in the scheme of things, I would classify February as a good reading month. I read 7 books and I feel like in 28 days that is a good amount. February is a little bit of a tricky month, especially for us readers because it's a shorter month and I feel like it goes by so quickly. Like I blinked and now it's March, which is wild. But let's dive into my monthly reading stats. So like I mentioned earlier, I read 7 books, which ended up being 2,783 pages. 14% of those books were considered fast-paced, and then 86% were deemed medium-paced. All of the books I read were also 300 to 499 pages, so those little 100-page novellas did not get me in February, even though I love them. And then I feel like this is a no-brainer, but 100% of the books I read were fiction. And then I read 7 romance books, 5 contemporary books, 2 sports romances, 2 fantasies, and 1 young adult. And my average rating for February was about 4 stars. So with that being said, let's get into it. So starting off, the first book I read in February was actually on my Kindle, and that was Wretched by Emily McIntyre. This is the 3rd book of the Never After series, and if you did not know, the Never After series is an interconnected standalone series. It's a dark romance kind of vibe, and they're all based on retellings of your like classic fairy tales. So the first one, Hooked, was about Peter Pan, the second one was Lion King, and then the third one, Wretched, was The Wizard of Oz. And the thing that kind of makes it a dark romance, a little bit of the twist that Emily McIntyre does, is that the main male character, or the main female character, is the morally gray villain kind of thing. So in Wretched, our main female character, Evelina, she is based off of the Wicked Witch of the West, which I absolutely loved. Up until Wretched, the villain was always the male main character, and I don't know why, but having a morally ambiguous female character just like did it for me. I loved it. It was the epitome of I support women's rights, but more importantly, I support women's wrongs. So when I say that this is a Wizard of Oz retelling, it is very loosely based. Like some of the names kind of correlate, some of the characters' attributes correlate with the original story, but it is not like word for word a retelling. It is more so like inspired by the original story, which I really like because I'm not a huge fairy tale person, so I feel like it's a good mix of fairy tale and then original good content. This book was such a vibe. I think I ended up rating it a 4 stars. I absolutely loved it. It is probably my favorite out of the series so far, just because I feel like, again, having that female main character being the morally gray, morally ambiguous character was just so fun to read about. This kind of inspired me to kind of read the Mine F series in the future, because I know that is kind of same vibes. Like we support women, but we support their wrongs as well. Like we love a little bit of chaoticness. So just to go into what Wretched is about, Evelina, again, is based on the Wicked Witch of the West, and she is like the mastermind behind this like drug called the flying monkey, and her dad is in the mafia, I think, or something. And our main male character, he is a DEA agent, and he is sent in to go undercover and kind of figure out who the mastermind behind Flying Monkey is. However, here is the twist. Evelina and the main male character, I think his name is like Nicholas, Let me just fact check that for you real quick. Yeah, his name is Nicholas. They actually met like the night before, and she was kind of in disguise because she was also on a mission, and they hooked up. And they just had this like chemistry and tension that is undeniable. And then the next day he shows up and she's like, I know you. And it's just kind of like, that's where it all unfolds, and it's just so good. So this book is obviously a dark romance. It is also technically, I want to say, like a mafia romance because of Evelina and her involvement in the crime scene. It's one night stand, kind of friends with benefits, I want to say, and yeah. 4 stars, absolutely loved it. Again, if you just want something that is just like pure vibes and chaos, this is the book for you. This is the series for you. Pick it up, okay? So moving on, the next book I read in February was Out on a Limb by Hannah Bowman Young. And when I was reading this book, I actually switched back from the physical copy to listening to it on audio. And I don't know why, but I just loved the audiobook. I think it's because the narrator had this like southern twang, and I was just vibing the whole time. But this book is about Win and Bo, and Win has an underdeveloped arm and Bo has a prosthetic leg. So it does have that like disability representation, which I really loved. I wish more romance books had kind of this representation, but basically they meet at this Halloween party. They have a one night stand, and from the get-go you can just tell that they had this amazing chemistry and banter, but they keep it as it was, a one night stand. They don't exchange phone numbers, don't go on any dates, whatever. But then a few weeks go by and Win finds out that she's pregnant. So that's kind of when the story unfolds. It's really about the pregnancy, them figuring out their relationship dynamic of like co-parenting, how to be good parents, how to deal with like an unplanned pregnancy, how to be parents with a disability, things like that. And it was just such a beautiful story. Not to mention the supporting characters really added to the story for me. I loved Sarah and Caleb, and their book just released and I literally cannot wait to pick it up. I do feel like it's gonna crush me because they're married and it's kind of about a marriage in trouble, but if I can get through this book, I can get through their book, okay? So you might be thinking, Grace, you do not like surprise pregnancy tropes. Like, what is going on? Are you out of your mind? Why did you even pick up this book? Well, peer pressure and FOMO kind of got to me. This book is very, very popular. I feel like the hype has died down, but it is popular nonetheless, and everyone has raved about this book. So I was like, why not? Like, why not pick it up? You know what I mean? And I feel like the author does an amazing job of really making it clear that this is a surprise pregnancy trope book. She has it in her author's note, and she's like, I fully understand that this might not be the book for you, so just like sit out. Like, you do not need to read this. And I trudged on anyways, and I'm so glad I did. I feel like surprise pregnancy is one of those tropes where it has to be done really, really well for me to enjoy it. Just like how Friends to Lovers is. It has like criteria in my head, and this book met all the criteria. I also feel like even though the main plot device of this book was the surprise pregnancy, this book is so much more than like pregnancy. There's a lot of aspects of self-discovery, self-love, and like really being on this journey of like bettering yourself and loving yourself that I really, really enjoyed. I feel like the pregnancy also did not overshadow the romance. Sometimes I feel like in unplanned pregnancy trope books, it just like overtakes the story. Same with like how kids are in books. Sometimes it overshadows the couple, and I feel like it did not at all. I feel like the pregnancy was used as a way to bring Win and Bo together, and I just ate it up. I loved it. I absolutely love Bo. He deserves Baby Daddy of the Year award. He was amazing. He was a chef's kiss. There was one point in the book where he was like, I feel like I'm not contributing enough. So like, what can I do to make your life easier? And I just like ate that up. You know those videos of like those husbands that make their pregnant wife sleep on the sofa and they sleep on the hospital bed? Bo would never. He would have a heart attack before he did that to Win. And for that, I stand, okay? I don't even think I said my rating, but I did rate this book a 4.25. I devoured it. I absolutely loved it. I'm pretty sure it did make me cry. I honestly can't remember because I think I blacked out when I did cry, story, but it was amazing. So the next book I read was a novel love story by Ashley Poston. I read The 7-Year Slip last year, and that was hands down my favorite read of 2024. I absolutely loved it, and I feel like that book kind of solidified Ashley Poston as one of my favorite authors. I know that's crazy because I only read one of her books, but I just love her writing style. I love the aspects of magical realism that every book of hers has, and I just know that anything she writes, I'm gonna love, okay? So this is Ashley Poston's newest release. I think she has another one coming out this year, but this is the one that came out in 2024. And like I mentioned earlier, it does have an aspect of magical realism. So it is about Elsie, our main female character, and she is just going through a tough time right now, and she's really banking on this group trip that her and her friends take every year. However, life just gets in the way, and she ends up being the only one that is able to attend. However, instead of staying home and wallowing, she decides to go on the trip by herself and live it up. However, on her way to the cabin that she rented, she has a bit of car trouble, and she ends up almost hitting someone. It's raining, the roads are bad, so she ends up staying the night in this small town. However, she wakes up the next day and realizes that the small town that she's stranded in is actually the fictional small town of her favorite romance series. So I ended up rating this book a 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I love the aspect of magical realism. I love that there was so many different storylines going on, and it felt like we had a great ensemble of a cast. I also really appreciated the aspect of having a bookish main character. I don't know why, but when a main character in a book also loves to read, I feel like I can relate to them more. Like there's just like so many little inside jokes and quirks that are added into the book, and it just like is so fun. I don't know, it just adds another element to the book. I'm not gonna lie, this book did make me cry. It didn't make me cry as much as The 7-Year Slip because that book was literally an emotional roller coaster. I think this book was a little bit more lighthearted, but there is a huge plot twist, and I will say that did get me. Like I bawled like a baby. I sobbed hysterically, and I'm a little sad that I did not get that on film because I think I was reading this book for a 24-hour reading challenge, but it was like 12 in the morning and I was sobbing in my bed. So maybe it was a good thing I didn't get that on camera because I don't think anyone wants to see that. However, the main thing that really just like kept this book from being rated higher than a 4 stars was the romance. I actually really liked the romance. However, there was something that happened, the third act breakup, and I feel like the third act breakup like kind of ruined the relationship for me in a way. But I feel like this book also is a little bit more than a romance book. I feel like the romance was a little bit of a subplot. This book is mainly about Elsie and her self-journey. There's like this whole point of the book where she realizes that she's okay not being with the main male character. She's thriving, she's whatever. And I did really appreciate that, but again, that third act breakup really ruined it for me. I'm not gonna lie. And if you've read the book, please comment down below and like give a spoiler warning or something because I just have to talk about it with someone because it did get me. Like I got, okay? But nonetheless, this book was a 4 stars. I still really enjoyed it. I love Ashley Poston, like I mentioned earlier. Anything she writes is like gold in my eyes. I also feel like because I read The 7-Year Slip and that is like a 6-star read for me, I was a little bit harsh in my rating. I feel like if I read this book before I read The 7-Year Slip, maybe I would have rated it higher. But yeah. So moving on, the next book I read was The Right Move by Liz Tomford. This is the second book of the Windy City series, and if you did not know, the Windy City series is an interconnected standalone series that kind of centers around sports romances. Each book is about a different player from a different sports team in Chicago, aka the Windy City. So the first book was a hockey romance, and now this one is a basketball romance, and the premise of this book centers around Indy and Ryan. Indy is actually the best friend of the main female character Stevie of the first book, and Ryan is Stevie's twin brother. And basically, Indy and Ryan end up being roommates because Indy caught her boyfriend of like 4 or 5 years cheating on her, and she had to move out pronto. However, Chicago is not a cheap city to live in. It's pretty expensive. So she ends up moving in with Ryan for the time being until she's able to get herself back on her feet. Ryan is not so jazzed about it. He's a very grumpy, isolated person, and he doesn't really like the idea of someone being in his personal space 24/7. So all in all, this book is obviously a sports romance, specifically a basketball romance. It's best friend's brother or sister's best friend, if you want to flip-flop it. It's also forced proximity, it's fake dating, and it's roommates to lovers. So the fake dating aspect actually is kind of fun, so I'm gonna go into it. Me getting off track like 10,000 times in this video, but that's just how my brain works, so we're gonna roll with it. But basically, Ryan and Indy end up fake dating each other because Ryan is made captain of the basketball team he's on, and the coach or like head guy or whatever just doesn't think Ryan is the right person for the job. So he ends up saying that Indy is his girlfriend to kind of make himself seem more personable. And yeah, it was a hoot. Like, it was a fun time. I ended up reading this book a 3.75. I think it's definitely my favorite. I was just eating up Indy and Ryan's relationship. I just loved their dynamic of Grumpy X Sunshine, but like it didn't feel like the cookie cutter Grumpy X Sunshine. I don't know, like there's a lot more going on under the surface that is kind of like the reason why Ryan is the way he is, but underneath it all, he's a sunshine, okay? He is a gooey marshmallow, and I just ate that up. So moving on, the next book I read during February was Funny Story by Emily Henry, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit hesitant going into this book. Even though I love Emily Henry, I think the negative reviews really got to me. YouTubers that I love and stan just didn't love this book, and I was a little bit worried because Happy Place was a 6-star read for me. I don't think anything will ever top that book for me. It took me a while to pick this book up, but I am so glad I did. So this book is about Daphne and Miles, and it is a pretty unique premise. So basically, Daphne and Miles's significant others both dump them for each other. Their significant others were like childhood best friends, and then one day they just were like, we love each other, and they dumped Daphne and Miles for each other. And it kind of turned their lives upside down. Daphne, who was living with her fiance, now has to move out. Miles, who's living with his girlfriend, also has lost out on a share of rent money, things like that. So Daphne ends up moving in with Miles for the time being, and they're just roommates. They're just like both going through heartbreak. They don't really know each other that well, but the main thing that like kind of catapults their friendship is that they're invited to their ex's wedding, and they're drunk. They're like, what if we win? Like, we should go. And they send in their RSVP, and then the next day they're hungover. They're like, what did we just do? Daphne's ex calls her up and is basically like, hey, you don't have to come. Like, you don't need to come to the wedding, like blah blah blah, literally trying to talk her out of it. And she's like, no, I'm coming and I'm bringing a date. And he's like, who? She's like, Miles. So they end up fake dating each other to kind of, I don't know, save face between their exes. However, that fake dating soon turns into a great friendship and relationship, and I just ate it up. Not to mention, this book also takes place in Michigan, and as a Midwest girly, I have been to Michigan quite a few times, so it just felt so atmospheric. Like, I could literally picture the places that they were going to, and it was so fun. Compared to Happy Place, this book is definitely a little bit more rom-com-y. It's a little bit more lighthearted. Obviously, it has a deeper meaning and deeper things going on. Daphne has dealt with a lot of like family issues. Miles is going through some things with him and his sister and his family, and so there always is like a deeper meaning with Emily Henry. But this book didn't make me cry, so I feel like in terms of Happy Place, that literally made me cry like 10,000 times, to Funny Story, this is definitely a little bit of a happier read. I also loved how chaotic and fun this premise is. Like, I could totally see this as a movie. Like, I know most of Emily Henry's books have been picked up to be a movie, but like this one is one where I'm like, yeah, that would eat on film. Like, that would eat. So I ended up reading this book a 4.75. It was so close to being a 5-star, like, do not get me wrong. However, after finishing this book, it just felt like something was missing, and I really could not put my finger on it. I think it was just that 5-star feeling just didn't hit, and it's really hard because most, if not all, Emily Henry's books always hit for me. But in the terms of like Happy Place, which is like my 5-star, 6-star read, I just felt like this book didn't top that or wasn't at the same level as that. So because of that, it was at a 4.75. I feel like also Miss Emily Henry is a little bit at a disadvantage. Sorry. I grade her a little bit more harshly. I have high expectations, but this book definitely did not disappoint me in any way. Like, it was such a good book. I really loved Miles and Daphne. I feel like they are the perfect definition of opposites attract, and I just ate it up. So moving on, the next book I read was actually the only fantasy book I read during February. It was definitely a romance heavy month, as it should be because of Valentine's Day. It is literally the month of love, but it was Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli, I want to say. I feel like I always butcher her last name and I feel so bad, but this is a young adult fantasy, and I'm just gonna let you guys know off the bat, it was a 5-star read. Like, it was a 5-star read. I just loved everything about this book. So Heartless Hunter is about Rune and Gideon. It is dual POV. It is also a young adult fantasy, but there is a little bit of spice. Like, I would classify this as new adult, like how Kingdom of the Wicked is new adult. That's how I would categorize this book. Like, there were some spicy things going on. However, this book was such a vibe. Like, it was so good. It takes place during this like Regency era of fantasy, I want to say. So there are like fantasy aspects of like witches and stuff, but there's also like balls and carriages, and they have to court each other, and they can't kiss each other in public, and all this other fun stuff that I just think really added to the read, and like it just felt so atmospheric. So basically, Rune and Gideon, they live in this kingdom that has been overthrown by this new government that hates witches. Before then, witches were in power, but a rebellion happened, the non-witches rose up, and now witches are outlawed. If you are caught being a witch, you're executed. If you're caught sympathizing with them, you're executed. Like, it is tough times out here, okay? Rune is a witch living amongst high society in plain sight, acting like she is not a witch. She's just this dumb socialite. However, she is actually the Crimson Moth, which is this like anonymous witch that helps other witches escape. Think like Harriet Tubman, but in a fantasy. Like, she is helping these people escape an oppressive system to go get their freedom, like that kind of vibe. And Gideon is like the head witch hunter. He is the one that helped the rebellion kill 2 of the witch queens. Like, he hates witches, okay? He has a big grudge against them, and he is starting to suspect Rune to being the Crimson Moth. And Rune also kind of wants to put herself in a marriage of convenience to gain more info of like future witch huntings, future purgings, things like that, to kind of help her cause as the Crimson Moth, which is where this like deceptive courtship of convenience kind of comes in. They decide to date each other so they can like gain more information on each other. So it's very deceptive. There's very much this line of like what's real and what's not real, and I just ate it up. I loved it. The tension, the chemistry, the banter, it just like was everything. I'm not gonna lie, this book did make me cry. I feel like Kristen Ciccarelli did such a good job of really making us fall in love with like all the supporting characters, and not really like honing in on this aspect of a love triangle, because I will say Rune is best friends with Gideon's brother, Alex, and Alex does have a bit of a crush on Rune. Like, it's very apparent from like page 1, but instead of like really honing in on this like love triangle that like other fantasies do, like in Fourth Wing or ACOTAR, she just like makes you love that character even though Rune does not share those feelings. And I just ate it up. I loved it. It was everything. I cannot wait for Kristen Ciccarelli to put out another book, because this like changed my brain chemistry. I'm not kidding. Like, I think about this book probably every day. I go on TikTok and I look at fan art. Like, it just did something to me, okay? I just loved it. So we are now on our last book of February, which was Caught Up by Liz Tomford. This is the 3rd book of the Windy City series, and it is a baseball romance. It's about Kai and Miller. Kai plays professional baseball, and he is also a single dad. A baby was literally dropped on his doorstep like a few months ago, so he is still new to parenting. He is still trying to find that like work-life balance kind of thing, kind of taking on this new role as dad and as a father figure, things like that. And he is having a tough time dealing with this transition. He wants to retire, however, he has too much potential and talent to retire, so he ends up getting a bunch of nannies. None of them stick, none of them do well. He is like the epitome of like a helicopter parent. This is where Miller enters the chat. She is a pastry chef. However, she's feeling a little bit of burnout. She doesn't have the same passion for her career as she once did, which is why she ends up taking the summer off and visiting her dad, who is actually the head coach of the baseball team Kai plays for. And Miller's dad kind of sees this opportunity to have his daughter travel amongst the team, so he ends up hiring Miller as Kai's new nanny, and it's basically like, she's my daughter, you can't fire her, okay? Like, even though you want to get rid of her, you can't. So it's single dad, it's the nanny trope, it's also like coach's daughter a little bit, and then obviously it's a sports romance. There's also a big aspect of found family. I feel like in an interconnected standalone series, found family is a given, but I feel like it's very apparent in this book. Overall, I rated this book a 3.5 star. I really did enjoy it. It kind of reminded me of Heartless, but like with professional baseball instead of cowboys, and I ate up Heartless. However, some of the things like just fell flat. Like, she calls him baseball daddy, and that just like dropped it immediately like a whole point level for me. Sorry, not sorry. Every time I read that, I like physically cringed. I don't know why. Actually, I know exactly why. It wasn't a cute nickname. Like Blue, what Ryan calls Indy Blue, cute nickname. Cute nickname. What Cade calls Willa, Red, cute. Cute nicknames. Baseball daddy is not on that list, I fear. I feel like that could have been kept in the drafts, okay? But yeah, I did enjoy this book. Like, do not get me wrong. I definitely want to continue the Windy City series. There's like 2 more books, play along, and then there's a new one coming out. So I'm very excited. I feel like I'm catching up with all the hype because I haven't really been reading this series or been keeping up with it, but I'm in love. So that is it for my February wrap up. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Comment down below if you've read any of these books, how many books you read in February, what your favorite read was. I would love to know. I love chatting with you guys in the comments, so let's chat it up, okay? And yeah, don't forget to subscribe for more videos. I am posting basically every week, and I have so many fun videos planned, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. And yeah, I will see you next time. Goodbye.